And then what's going to happen is I'm going to pause for a second and see me pop up, and people will get half of this conversation. And then I'll actually say, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Lore Reloaded. Always a pleasure and fun to see you guys here. Today we got a special treat. We got Pensky File, or the Pensky Files. You guys may know them as the best podcast ever to be known. Soon to be recognized by CBS, and probably be the richest people that we'll ever know. So you guys want to introduce yourselves and say hi and all of that good stuff?
Hi, my name's Richard Pensky, and this is File.
I'm Wes, and just to get the CBS stuff out of the way, I'm Wes, and I hate Star Trek Discovery, so that'll be the starting point. No, but thanks for having us, Lore. We're much appreciative to branch out and go other places and to see other audiences and stuff. But we run a Star Trek podcast is the main thing we do, which is called the Pensky Podcast, which is a terrible name for a Star Trek podcast, but it's what we've got.
Locked into that one early by accident.
We've been doing like 6 years at this point. We've covered TNG, TOS, DS9, Lower Decks, Picard, and now we're on Star Trek Discovery's 3rd season. We do the typical sort of Star Trek, or not Star Trek, but like TV show podcast thing, where it's one episode per podcast, kind of a critical analysis. And I guess that the show is, the point of the show is what we've kind of stumbled into is I would say a critical analysis of Star Trek. So it's the greatest compliment that we ever get is that people would say, we don't have rose-colored glasses towards this. We tend to like the show when it's good, and we don't like the show or the series when it's bad. And people generally find the show to be fairly fair, or critical in a fair way. Anyway, so that's how I would describe what we do. And Clay has been a host for a couple of years now at this point. It started off as like a guesting thing where random people would come on, but Clay is now the full-time guest host. And that's pretty much it.
How many people?
My way up from being a featured player into the main cast of the Pensky.
That's right.
Basically, yeah. I mean, how many people have asked you why you review it if you hate it so much? Did you get that at all?
Discovery?
Yeah, Star Trek in general.
I
But
like
probably
Star
for Discovery.
Trek.
I know, but how many
like-
people have asked you, why do you hate this? Why do you watch it if you hate it so much? Like, that's a common thing for YouTube.
I don't feel like
Go ahead,
really,
Clay.
I was just say I don't really feel like we get too much of that because I think the
Get
stuff
it once
that
in a while. We do get
Yeah.
it once in a while, but it's not a major theme on the comments or feedback or anything.
Yeah, because I think the stuff that we don't like, we're not going into it to hate watch it or anything like that. It's just I think we both find it interesting to dissect from a structural point of view and a storytelling point of view and stuff like that. And since Star Trek is something that we both really enjoy, we go in, I would say, at least I have gone in just as hard on an episode of TNG that I didn't think was particularly good as I do on Discovery. Not recently, because it's been a while since we've done TNG, but we seem to be stuck in the Discovery. I think that's what parts. Maybe if it comes off angry at all, maybe it's because we've just been in a Discovery slog for the past 12 weeks or so. But
It's been slow.
I think generally people realize that we are not coming at it from a point of malice or anything like that, which I hope comes across, because that's not. I've never wanted it to come off as though we're doing it just to be mean at be mad about something, be mean at something.
I would say 95% of the audience that we have, at least on YouTube and Twitter and stuff at this point for Discovery, generally agrees with us. There's probably like a 10% that modulate it and like the show a little bit, and then so it's probably like 80, 10, and 10. There's probably 10% that really like it and have a hard time with our analysis of it, and there's probably another 10 that they think it's okay, maybe would be the best description of it. And then I think the majority of our audience tends to agree with us, but it's hard to say outside of like YouTube comments what that really means.
Right.
And also, Wes, I think, actively hates Discovery now. I actually do enjoy watching the show. I don't particularly like it, but I do enjoy watching it as a piece of Star Trek content.
Sure. Well, one of the things that I found interesting was that you were critical of what I call legacy Trek. which is generally pre-JJ verse and all of that good stuff. And even if you actively hate it, you do seem to come off fair, or at least hold a standard to the same. Because a lot of the well, I don't even like to call it. A lot of people who attack Discovery either do it for, let me rephrase that. A lot of people that I've encountered who dislike Discovery, especially if they're on the internet and they have a YouTube channel or they have their own podcast or whatnot. Not you guys, obviously. Do it because they're either in this hate circle that they don't realize that they're just hating something just to hate it. They're not actually looking at it objectively, or I think they're grifting or trying to get money off of it. But when I did an analysis of what you guys do, you really do come off as fair. So that's why I wanted to have you on and have a discussion, because I enjoy. That's what the channel is for. I enjoy talking about things with people who disagree. So let's jump into that for a second. I saw a clip. Since then, I've watched more of your stuff. But what really got my attention was I was actually doing a live stream like this, and I happened to come across one of your clips, and it was about Admiral Vance, which I thought you guys were extremely uncharitable with. But it does come into what we're talking about. Is Discovery Season 3 an improvement?
The title of that clip is called "Did Star Trek Discovery Neuter Admiral Vance?" which is a very evocative title, which is the point. But yeah,
well,
my point.
That's the game.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Well, I mean,
no, that's it.
Yeah, I mean, it's just I thought it wasn't even the title, because that's the game. I don't really look at the title. I look at the content more than anything else. And again, we'll look at it overall. We don't have to discuss that title specifically, but is Discovery Season 3 an improvement? I do think that it is an improvement when you look at anything from digital cinematography to dialogue to the lore to the characters, anywhere from Michael Burnham to the Admiral himself. I think that every aspect of it is better than what came before. Now, I'd be interested, especially because Wes, I'm horrible with names, so I'm going to get you guys confused all the time. Don't get upset about it. But why do you think it's not an improvement? Do you think it's not an improvement from a real world standpoint, or the actual story, the arcs? Why do you think it's Season 2 effectively? Or I can give you my thoughts on why I think it's better, since I'm the positive claim, if you prefer.
Yeah, well, let me say something quick. I was actually more interested in having you go first, because me and Clay have been talking on the last podcast that we did. We're not quite sure where the positivity specifically comes from, which is kind of a criticism that we have of people who generally like the show. So what I will say is that, in my opinion, and then Clay can, I guess, speak quickly, is that this is the worst season of a bad show that's always been bad. And in my opinion, Season 2 was better than this one, mostly because of technical reasons. And I think that what Season 3 was trying to do was move out of the shadow of canon, which I think that the show is responding to in a fan feedback sense of, like, we have to escape this major problem that a lot of people who I think unfairly criticize Discovery say that all the problems are due to canon inconsistency that the show has. So what they did is they jumped into a future world where canon can't really exist at that point, and they can blaze their own path. But what they've done this season is actually taken a step back in terms of everything that was a problem in the earlier seasons, which is pacing, character development, understanding story structure, understanding, like, technically how you're supposed to tell a story, understanding how to tell a story in a way that makes sense and makes the audience actually invested in what's going on. And then finally, just a failure at world building is the other big catastrophe that sort of set back Season 3. Clay, if you wanted to add on to that, but I would like to hear you, Lore, give a positive thing first that I could actually respond to. I think it's a little bit better or more interesting for me, and to hear your side first.
Yeah, I would agree pretty much with everything Wes said. I have never thought that the show fails on a technical level. I think it looks amazing. I think the design, well, I have problems with the design this season, but generally I think the design is fantastic. It looks really good. It's all been storytelling problems for me, essentially. And I think Season 2, oddly enough, was more focused in what they were trying to do than this one. And I agree that jumping to the future seemed like it was going to be this fresh start, but they really just kind of never got off the starting blocks for me.
I don't know what outside of canon means. If you mean not being beholden to what's come before, I would agree. It's still, and maybe we need to define what canon is. I honestly just think the literal opposite of almost everything you just said. So when we look at season 1, season 2 versus season 3, one of the things that Trek tried was a focus, unusual focus on a specific character, that of Michael Burnham. We've seen that in DS9, and maybe the original series to a degree, but not at the levels that we were seeing in season 1 and season 2. In season 3, they've made it more ensemble. More characters have gotten to expand, both primary characters and secondary characters, in my opinion. I was not a huge fan of the first episode, but I think since episode 2 and on, everything has had somewhat of a logical progression. Seeing how the universe has turned out seems consistent or logically consistent with what we know of the individual species and such. I think that the United Earth makes some sense. Trill, we don't know a lot about, but that seemed to. Vulcan and the Romulans becoming Navarre, I think that was inevitable in everything we've seen beforehand. I will agree. It depends on what you mean by pacing. When you say pacing, there are some episodes that are problematic on the way that it's written from a pacing standpoint. And maybe it's not pacing that I'm thinking about. I do believe that there are a few things they should have expanded on and taken a little more time with. As an example, in the last episode, which I'm sure you guys have seen, but if for those watching, if you haven't seen it, spoilers. In the last episode, we learn a lot about the Emerald Chain that really we should have learned over the season, not just a dialogue between Vance and Asira, right? But I think that's a wonderful expansion of the Emerald Chain. I like the fact that it's not the same hats that we've always had. Like in TNG and DS9, you have the bad guy hat. The Dominion effectively have the bad guy hat. Ferengi and Romulans in TNG generally had the bad guy. Well, no, they did good with Romulans. The Ferengi had the bad guy hat in TNG, right? And so we now have a more nuanced way of looking at it. You even have Michael taking a step back, both from the dialogue and the script and in universe, and letting others breathe and realizing it's not just all about her.
But they all came back for her.
They all didn't come back for her. No. Are you talking about the latest episode?
Stamets, yeah. Stamets is less. Would you think that Stamets is wrong? I guess from that point.
I think that's nuanced. I think Stamets was angry. I think he was screaming. I think he thought he was about to lose his husband and his. I'm not a huge fan of Adira being his daughter. I'll be honest. But I think he thought he was losing his family. And so he was saying anything he could to stop her or to hurt her. And this is one of the issues. I think that really hits on it. There's so much more nuance than just what is said on screen that if you just take it at its word, it's definitely cringe. But that's a perfect example. He was angry. If you go back and you watch why they went through it, and again, this is season 2, so it's not the best. They went through it because they needed to keep the seer AI from getting into the hands of anyone of that time. They went through it as a sacrifice. They didn't do it for Michael, at least in theory.
Well, why did they all go? Why didn't just Michael go with the data? Why did they all choose to go?
Hey, my friend, you will not see me defending season 2. I can tell you why they went through the wormhole, though. They should. There's definitely better ways of doing it. They could have actually sent it by itself. I agree. But the reason why they went through it was to get Discovery out of the 23rd century, so that it can't be used, so that another control couldn't come through. Now they followed. Right. Now they made Michael this messiah, right? Where they have to follow her through. That's the only way to do it. But they didn't go through for her.
But why wouldn't they just send it by itself? If they're not going through for Michael, why are the other characters going through?
As I said, I will not defend season 2. I think there were better ways of them doing it.
Sure, but you can see my problem here. That why would you doubt that what Stamets is saying is false?
Because that's not what the story tells us. When we watch the story, when we watch the dialogue between Pike, Saru, Michael, and everyone else, they had to get Discovery out of that universe. So they all decided that they were going to go through the wormhole to get it away from any bad person that was going to use it. They sent it into the future. I mean, that's what they said. If you choose not to accept, if you personally interpret that,
No,
that
I'm
all
not.
of them
I'm
follow.
I'm not denying that they sent Discovery into the future to do that. I understand that that's why they would do that. Clay, do you understand? Do you understand what I'm saying?
I think we're splitting hairs over one of the better elements of this season so far. I think it's whether or not they actually went through specifically for Michael. I think that scene works in the way it was presented.
Even if they did, sorry, I don't want to interrupt, and you can go, Clay, but I just want to add, and you guys can interrupt me anytime. Even if they did do that for Michael, that's a failing of season 2, not season 3, in my opinion. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Clay. I didn't mean to.
Yeah, I don't think I think that scene was a good scene, and I think it was effective that's a great thing to stab Michael with if you really want to get her riled up or really get her between the ribs, because obviously she feels responsible for them coming to the future and whatnot. So that scene, I think, that's a good moment. I think the problem is, for me anyway, that this season, while they have opened up the characters, as you said, they haven't really done anything with them that I find to be successful storytelling. For instance, they go out of their way this season to be very meta and self-aware, and then just kind of like leave that on your lap and don't really do anything with that. They've mentioned multiple times that Michael has this messiah complex, or everything has to be about her, and she's like, yeah, that's how it is. Anyway, moving on. And then they don't do anything that subverts that or makes that a lesson to be learned or anything. They have her go to the future, and she grows her hair, and all of a sudden she's a new character who acts so different because she spent 12 months in Europe or whatever it is. But she hasn't really changed. She's not doing anything. She's not more aggressive than she's been. She's not acting any differently. Nothing she's done this season has been any different than a decision she'd make any other season. So I haven't really felt any movement there. And as far as the season as a whole, it's the stuff that they have focused on. You said there's a lot of stuff that's you have to kind of read between the lines. Let's look at the Osira and Emerald Chain stuff. On paper, sure, great idea. But the fact that they just backload that all into a single scene does not, from a storytelling standpoint, I do not find that satisfying, and I do not think that is a good storytelling mechanic, because we've spent 10 minutes across 12 episodes so far with Osira and the Emerald Chain, and we don't really know anything about her aside from the fact that she's the space pirate. And then in this episode, she drops that. I mean, the last couple episodes, she's found out that they have a spore drive, somehow figured out how to recreate it because she has a science institute. And it's all this stuff that is just, it's not earned exposition they're giving you. It's just, we need to facilitate this moment that we want to have. So here's all the information you need. And it's not really backed up by any work they've done for the rest of the season.
I'll throw my general point or criticism of Discovery is that it's purely a failure of storytelling. I think that if you compare Discovery to any other TV show, I don't watch a tremendous amount of TV, but like Discovery is, I would almost argue, like objectively the worst at telling a single story. It's kind of strange how bad it is. And what the problem is that we talked about this in our latest podcast. There's a thing called the story arc, right? Which is that there's exposition, which leads into rising action, which has a climax, and then it comes back down in the release, and then there's a resolution to your story. Discovery fails on both a serial and episode by episode basis, where it can't get this done. So what Discovery tends to do is it has a tremendous amount of exposition, and then it never has a rising action sequence where things get worse for your heroes or things change in some way that actually makes you rethink what's actually been happening to the story and the characters. It jumps from exposition to climax, and then it just reboots itself. And it says, here's some more information for you. Now we're going to climax again. Here's some more information. Book lives on a planet with firefly things. Let's go meet his family. You meet his brother. His brother says, we have a lot of bad blood. Here's a whole bunch of exposition about why we have bad blood. climax. They solve it, and they're friends again. Discovery rinses and repeats that storytelling endlessly, and it's extremely unsatisfying. They did it in the serial story this year, which is The Burn, which I think is pathetic and has been the major reason why this has been such a terrible season. The Burn is not an interesting mystery. If you solve the Burn, nothing changes in the universe for the characters. You just learn information. So all they've been doing is a breadcrumb mystery of dropping these clues about what happened with the Burn. Here's a little information. Here's a little bit more. All this amounts to is exposition. It's not changing anything for the characters. It's not learning anything about Burnham. It's not learning anything about Vance. It's not learning anything about what the Federation needs to be, why the Federation exists in this world, how the Federation exists in the future, what does the Federation believe, what compromises does the Federation need to make in order to survive in this new universe. All the Burn is just drops of exposition with eventually a climax. And people always tell you, wait till they get to the truth. Wait till they figure out what happened with the Burn. It's all going to save the season. No season of Discovery has ever been saved by its reveal in the end. It's always just been a lame march down this exposition pathway. And so you get to the end, and you're like, okay, a little Kelpian yelled, and it shut off all the dilithium. And you go, but it's just, what does that change about the universe? What changes about that story when you learn the answer to that mystery? Nothing. And so it's a whole waste of 12 hours to get to that point, in my opinion.
And
so
also
you guys aren't fans of the original series, The Next Generation and Voyager?
In what sense?
So everything you just described to me occurs in every one of those. Deep Space Nine was a little bit different, I think. I'll agree that the payoff for the Burn was, at best, lackluster, and like you said, at worst, laughable. Like a child. They basically X-Men'd it, ultimately, because he was in her stomach and his DNA changed because they were surrounded by radiation, and now he's one with dilithium. I'm not a huge fan of that either. But the storytelling is basically the same that we see in all of the others, with a few moments of greatness where they go outside of that. Like The Best of Both Worlds, I think, is a great example of that.
Sorry, what's
Year
the
of
argument?
Hell.
That there's a lot of bad Star Trek episodes?
What I'm saying is they're formulaic of all of Trek. So what you described is what happens in the original series, Next Generation.
No, but I'm not saying this is bad because it's a formula. No. I'm saying that this is bad because structurally they're not following good storytelling techniques.
Yeah, but that's well, I would. Good storytelling is an argument in and of itself because there's all kinds of different theories for that. But I agree, the theory that you're proposing is probably the best. That's why everyone uses it. But it's what they do in the. So why is Discovery something you focus on when I could show you season 1, season 2, most all seasons of TNG that do it? Why is it just? Is it because that's what we're focusing? So you've covered it, and you would say the same about TNG then, if they do the same formula.
I don't think it's not a formulaic issue, because I mean, if you look at the way that they've presented the Burn storyline, the first thing that I think of watching this is nobody bothered to look into this for 150 years or however long it is, because Discovery shows up and in like a weekend they figure everything out.
It wasn't
in a way that nobody else bothered to do, and they don't even when they show up and they start wanting to get into it, Federation doesn't even really care that much.
I mean, that's a little unfair, though. I'm sorry, Clay. I don't mean. I'll stop interrupting you if it's upsetting you, but I think that's unfair.
No, it's the steps that they've taken to get, at least if you want to compare it to season 2, at least the Red Angel story had like an ethos behind it, and they had stories that were built off of the eventual teasing out of what this was going to be, whether or not you were satisfied with the outcome. You had episodes like when Pike and when they go to that what the hell's the name of the planet with the
New Eden.
Red Angel, New Eden. When they go to New Eden, they have a story that has themes that they talk about that is related to this expanding out and furthering of the Red Angel story. Whereas with this one, 80% of the stuff that you get about the Burn happens off screen, essentially. Like they get like 2 black boxes, and then even they draw it out.
Vulcan info.
The Vulcan thing. They draw out essentially the fact that Adira forgot to carry the 1 in an algorithm for like 3 episodes or 2 episodes, and it's just not. There's nothing there. It's not.
Forgot to carry the 1. What do you mean in that?
Well,
She says she gets tired. One of the reasons that they haven't been able to track it for some reason, it delays the progress in getting the burn for an episode because Stamets says you haven't been sleeping, and she makes they make a mistake.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
Okay.
and
I was just making sure I was on the same page.
Yeah, ultimately, this story, which is supposed to be, this is the through line for your season, I do not feel has any real contextual or thematic weight to any of the stories they've been telling. Whereas season 2, for better or worse, the Red Angel story did.
Okay. So let's address a couple of things because there's a lot you guys have put on the plate. Let's first, them not figuring it out. We don't know what exactly they did or tried beforehand. Now you could say that that is a problem with the writing or the storytelling. I think it's arguable if that's something that needs to be gone into given what they were trying to go for. But what was it, like 2/3 of the fleet was gone, or 80% of the fleet is gone, or something like that? Like a massive amount of Starfleet is just destroyed. So them not looking into it immediately and them trying to handle the situation and survive. Yeah, but I mean, they've been trying to survive for 100 years. If the United States military was reduced to only being able to defend Tennessee, Alabama, and Kentucky, then them figuring out what happened isn't like, let's say it was destroyed for some unknown reason. Them figuring out what's happened versus trying to just keep their people alive, even for 100 years, is understandable. I mean, space is vast. One of the things I think, and you guys correct me on this because I could be wrong, the origin of the burn was a long way away, right? Didn't Osira have to use the courier network to even get there? It was like stupidly far away. So them not being able to find it, I don't necessarily have a huge issue. Here's
what the pieces. Sorry, just the pieces they put together to get there required like calculations done by a ship that's 1,000 years old. They basically pulled out 2 points and they were like, triangulate this and triangulate this, and then they went to Vulcan and asked them for like a disk drive.
The third piece.
Disk drive. I like the way you guys.
I like the way you guys. Point is that nothing special needed to be done for Discovery to solve this. This wasn't some sort of like Michael Burnham or Discovery is innately capable of figuring out what happened with the burn. They found black boxes.
Sure.
The Federation apparently wasn't interested in finding the black boxes for things that I would disagree. Like
they're trying to survive.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. Again, if I get annoying, I'm not trying. So you guys just tell me to stop. They're just trying to live. Are you saying that they should try to find these black boxes and find out where it is, or feed the people that need to be fed? Right? They have guy hasn't even eaten. Go ahead.
Okay, so backing up 2 seconds then. Does that mean would you say that finding out what caused the burn is an important thing to figure out?
I would say
in universe.
Yes. I would say with what's presented to us, they have more immediate issues they have to take care of. I would say that while I would agree trying to figure out is something that could be vital, they simply don't have that option.
Why is the burn the centerpiece of this story, of this season? If it's not
because with Discovery at this point and the resources Discovery has, first off, I think Michael was wrong. So Michael, one of the things she was saying is like, there's no way that Starfleet can be whole until we found out what happened with the burn, right? A Kelpian child having a crying fit doesn't help Starfleet. So Michael was wrong, in my opinion. But there are a couple of advanced things that they have with Discovery that they didn't have beforehand. First off, they have an outsider's point of view. For over 100 years, they've just been trying to survive and hope to God that they don't get destroyed by the Emerald Chain. And trying to feed their people using their own excrement to do so, right? That's how desperate they are. Secondly, the Discovery is more than just an old ship, right? It has original databases that they didn't have access to. It also has the Seer AI that help them find that can help them find various things. That can help them out, which again, the Federation didn't have. They additionally now have access to the courier network. Again, they've been so focused on trying to survive, they haven't reached out to other people who could help them. It's because Michael went and started looking and used the courier network within the Emerald Chain, something Starfleet can't access, that they were able to even get the black boxes.
But Michael
So
did
I
it
think-
without Discovery. She didn't have Discovery when she found the black boxes.
Well, sure. I don't disagree with that, but you're asking, the point was, what did Discovery add to it? But yes, Michael did do things without Discovery. I agree.
So
Also,
It's interesting.
one other thing. Starfleet didn't have the ability to have an earnest conversation. Not a huge fan of the way they went about this, but I like the concept. Starfleet didn't have the ability to have a conversation with Navarre or the Vulcans because of what they had done in their past, which was vital to them figuring it out as well.
why weren't they able to have an earnest conversation?
Because, and it discussed it in the episode, when Navarre and Vulcan were there, when it was still Vulcan. No, it became Navarre at that point, didn't it? Yeah. The Federation Council had pushed Navarre to create this technology so that they didn't have to rely on dilithium
not the
anymore.
reason for the conflict. Why can't they talk to Navarre? Why
Because
can't
Navarre cut off all diplomatic relations after that. Navarre blamed the Federation and Starfleet for doing it, left Starfleet, and cut off all diplomatic conversations. It was only because, and again, I'm not a huge fan of the way that they fixed it, but it was all because of Michael being related to Spock that Navarre even talks to Starfleet. Starfleet couldn't reach out to them at all. Unless I may have missed something. Maybe they already had. If they already had diplomatic communications, maybe that's my side. But that was my understanding.
I think there's a schism here between how we're looking at this, right? So Discovery to me could break canon constantly, every single episode, and be a great TV show. It could be a great Star Trek show if it just completely ignored canon and was irrelevant to the details of the Romulans and the Vulcans and everything like that. I don't put priority on the connections of the plot here. I'm not super concerned about whether or not the details that someone like Stamets says something under his breath in one episode and it ties back in later. My fundamental issue is that I don't understand why they're telling me this story about the burn. If in your opinion the burn is irrelevant to the Federation, why is Discovery looking after this? If the whole point of jumping ahead is to show us that there's been a Federation that's been compromised somehow because of what this dilithium shortage has done to it, the show has not done that. I don't know anything about the Federation, and you're saying that there's a lot of blanks that could be filled in. These are huge storytelling blanks that need to be filled in for the story to make sense. If you're not going to build the world, show me what the Federation is in this new universe where they are somehow like the show insists that the Federation has become compromised. I would argue they are not compromised at all. All they can do is not go places, but they still try. The Federation and Vance in this season are good people who try to do the right thing constantly. They have not had to make any kind of hard ethical choice about things to change. Discovery has not illuminated anything for them. All it's done is found a black box and said, this is the way forward. And there's no introspection in this show. It doesn't care about what the stuff is going on underneath the surface. It doesn't care about the world building. It doesn't care about this. The only reason this story would be interesting to me is what does the Federation look like when it's been compromised and it has to make changes? And Burnham and Discovery, coming from a nobler past, come into that and say, no, this is not the way. Let us show you the way. And the Federation maybe has a good argument for the way that they are because of this dilithium shortage. They have to hoard the dilithium, something like that. Discovery is just unsatisfying to me in what it chooses to pursue in terms of what the story is supposed to be about. Clay, did you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I would say.
Can you give me hold that thought? Give me 1 second, Clay. I have to hook up my headset. Just 1 second. But
sure.
Hold that thought. I want to hear you.
You're not going to hand wave the performance just because Fur Elise was a great piece of music. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And Osira, I think they were trying to position her as the sort of Gul Dukat character, but they didn't do the work to make that viable. They just completely backload the entire thing. And
I think it's been a common trope of Discovery's villains. It's not just
Yes,
Osira.
yeah.
This is a Discovery villain problem across all seasons.
Yeah, and so the uh, electricity and narrative conflict and drama that you would pull from a scene with Gul Dukat in Deep Space Nine, where he gets in the room with Cisco or whoever, and they start hashing it out, doesn't exist because up to this point we haven't seen any indication that she's that kind of character. She's just been played as this space pirate. And I would also argue, I wanted to ask you, do you feel like the deal that she's making with Starfleet is honestly a depiction of her being a gray area character, or is it ultimately just her figuring out the way to hedge her power and not be held accountable? Because the thing, for me anyway, the thing that undercuts it being a gray zone thing is when Vance says, "All right, but we have to prosecute you," and she completely balks at it. Because if it was truly she was doing it for the betterment of the galaxy, then she should sacrifice herself, or you would think that she would be open to the idea.
I think there's a couple of things to that. I think I see more, and this could be a part of what I do for a living. Like for the last 2 years, as stupid as this sounds, and I'm grateful for all the fans watching, by the way, but my entire living has been, my entire career has been breaking down like the nitty gritty aspects of science fiction, mostly Star Trek, right? I have an 8 hour breakdown of the Dominion War.
Nice.
Yeah. So maybe it's the fact that I just see a bit more nuance when I watch all of this. To kind of go what you were saying, Wes, before, and it's quite possible I'm giving it more than what it is actually giving to it. That's something that I'll consider when it comes to that. Because I think it is a lot better built out than what's being given credit for it. But that, again, could go back to what I'm saying. When it comes to the character of Osira, I completely agree that this is somewhat left field. It should have been extended out through through at least 3 or 4 episodes. I don't know that it should be from episode 1, but definitely a few episodes. I think that makes her a gray character?
What's her motivation here for joining Federation?
I think her motivation is that I think it's twofold. I would somewhat agree that she wants to she's not willing to completely give up her power. I'll agree with that. But I do think that she sees the writing on the wall and that they have to combine with the Federation to survive. I do think that there's some earnesty there. Some people have theorized, and again, this goes back to them not expanding, I wish they would, that perhaps she's being pressured by the other warlords, or whatever, minions, whatever they're called in the Emerald Chain, to combine with the Federation because they simply can't survive once the dilithium is gone. So, go ahead. Maybe I'm not answering.
I think I understand what you're saying, but what's the narrative conflict here in that case? What is preventing this treaty from going through? Or what's interesting about it? So as far as the Discovery of the TV show says, it's advancing, you have to undergo prosecution for this. That's the trade we'll make.
See, that's the tool, but I don't think that's the point. The point of this is the Federation isn't willing to give up its ideals, even if it means its own destruction. That's what I see when I see Vance doing it. Now, there's an interesting point here, because if you look at like the Khitomer Accords, they didn't ask for all of the, or even maybe the Dominion War, but during the Khitomer Accords, they didn't ask for anybody to stand trial or anything like that. The Treaty of Algeron with the Romulans, they didn't ask for any of them for their atrocities. So this is kind of unique, but. I think
they made an alternate universe space Hitler an officer on their ship, so I don't know. I don't know how much they really care about their.
Well, we're talking about Vance, not Discovery. I mean, I think that's kind of fair. But Vance, I think it's the fight for the soul of the Federation. Vance knows that this is the best deal. This is on a silver platter. This would take Starfleet out of the Dark Ages, but he's not willing to do it if it means they have to follow a warlord, someone who is so dirty she couldn't possibly be a part of the Federation without going through trial.
She agrees to stop doing a lot of the nefarious things she's been doing. in this, right? That's part of the deal.
Sure, but she's already done so much harm that her not standing trial in and of itself is I don't know the word I'm looking for, an injustice, we'll say. Now again, the Federation has signed stuff before, but I saw it as a fight for the soul of the Federation. To accept this, willingly letting someone who is bloodied go, or to stand by their ideals. Maybe I'm seeing too much into it. I think that's a good counter. I really appreciate you guys, I want to say.
Oh, thank you. We appreciate you as well.
I don't... Imagine you're not a Star Trek fan, right? How are you supposed to draw that from this season? This is the first season of Star Trek you've ever watched. How are you supposed to know that the soul of the Federation is at risk here? What does that mean for someone who's unfamiliar with this franchise?
Well, yeah, but I mean, I agree that that's a common problem. They go into it expecting you to know a lot, but you could say that of several different seasons of Deep Space Nine. So, I mean, they don't.
No, I wouldn't say that I wouldn't say that you are completely in the dark if you watch a DS9 episode, or like a revelation in a conflict is like, where is this coming from? What is this supposed to be? You might not be familiar with a character that has been shown up before, but those shows were much better at telling a story that would build to a crescendo that you could actually understand. I would say that if you are unfamiliar with what the Federation is supposed to represent, this season has done nothing to explain what the Federation represents, right? And
I don't know. I would also
add to that, Wes. I think the show in general has a tough time with that, because usually what ends up happening over the past 2 seasons is it never really comes up, and then the second to last episode or the last episode, somebody makes a teary-eyed, impassioned speech about it, and you go, "Oh, okay."
I don't know that I agree with that. I think we've had
what is
specific times.
Sorry, can you just give me like one specific? What has the Federation done this season that espouses Federation values?
The defense of Kaminar. I'd have to
that was
think
done
on
off
it.
screen, right? That's done off screen. That's just Vance sends the ship to Kaminar. Is that what you're talking about for that one? What has Vance decided to do that espouses Federation values on screen in a story?
I would say the first meeting of Starfleet with the conversation between Vance and Saru and Michael espouses the Federation ideals, or where they wanted to be. I would say when Vance decides not to throw Michael into the cell, God, I hate being Southern, into the jail cell. I can't say E's well.
It's okay. We can't say ours.
I'd say that is a showing the Federation ideals, because she saved people, he let it go. I think that speaks to the Federation ideals. I honestly think it does. Now I'd have to think about it, but I bet if I took some time, I could bring you examples of it. Now, is it straight 100% TNG Picard in front of a screen telling you what the Federation is? No, I don't. I would also say, just one last thing, I would also say that I disagree. And maybe I'm wrong on this, maybe I need to go back and watch it, but I think if you watched starting at season 7, I think, of Deep Space Nine, and you watched just from season 7 up to In the Pale Moonlight, I think it was season 7 he did that. I think that's In the Pale Moonlight. I don't think you'd have an adequate understanding of what Starfleet is. I think it requires you to have watched previous seasons as well.
I think
Deep Space Nine is... Oh, I was just going to say, it's a little bit tougher with Deep Space Nine, just because what Starfleet is gets kind of murky in that show generally.
I agree. I see, but that's why I'm saying I don't think that it's as good a argument with Discovery, because it happened in Deep Space Nine. I think everybody, and I'd be interested, this may be a little bit of a tangent. I think a lot of people, myself included, look at Starfleet really based on TNG. The ideals given to us by TNG. I'd be curious if you guys agree with that or not.
I would say, if I could guess as to why that is, I think that's where it was crystallized, really, because it didn't.
Yeah.
From what I remember, anyway, it's not really that much of a factor in TOS, and it's not until you really get into, and even the early movies, it's not. I don't really talk about that much.
Well, sorry. So, all right. So, I guess I'm trying to hammer home the point of why this doesn't work for a Federation story for Discovery's 3rd season, right? So say you give Discovery's 3rd season Federation TNG values, right?
Okay, because that's what I think. I think that's a return to. I do think that. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. So that's your perspective on it. Where is the narrative conflict coming from there? In terms of this story and what happens in Discovery, where does the Federation being good create conflict for something? I would argue Discovery's third season Federation should be much more similar to a Section 31 type government organization. That is like, we're trying to survive. We're trying to push through this. We had to make a few compromises to do the right thing that needed to be happening. What they do instead is they do give it a TNG outlook, which is like on the broad swaths of this is like Discovery shows up and Burnham shows up and everyone's like, a Federation? I haven't heard the Federation in 150 years. Oh, actually the Federation is over there. So it's like you're internally not sure where the Federation stands in this universe. You go there and they are so blandly uncompromised. They just can't go places. That's the only problem the Federation has in this show. And it's not narratively interesting. There's nothing there that you can push against.
I don't think so, because we see specifically they talk about how they're in triage and they can't do anything but survive.
I don't want talk though. That's the problem. I want Vance to do something. I don't want him to just chime in.
They have 10 episodes. That seems unreasonable. They have 10 episodes, and you want them to follow an arc that the season didn't follow, right?
They could have eliminated the burn. Would be my argument. Yes,
or made it more worthwhile. I agree on that. I'm sorry. Go ahead. I was agreeing with you.
No, that's just I would like to hear an argument for why you would not portray the Federation doing something in this, because Discovery acts as the proxy for the Federation, which is very unsatisfying because it gives you no insight into what the actual Federation thinks about things. It only shows you the Discovery crew doing stuff.
And also you have Discovery, who is a relic of 1,000 years ago, and it has their own understanding of what Starfleet is. And I mean, now this is kind of pushing it into a different show, but they don't use that as a counterpoint really for the modern Federation. Like, there's no real Vance.
What's special about Discovery in this universe?
Well, I was going to say Vance never really gives them an order or gives them a mission that they think goes against Starfleet values, because Starfleet doesn't really. They're kind of middling in this, and I think all the stuff you're talking about, James, I find there's a very sharp distinction between situations and stories. I think the stuff you're talking about is a great situation, but I think it's a badly told story, because all those elements are a great setup, and they're great when you put them on paper, and it's great where if you explain to somebody what the setup was and where everything was going. It's great. I think it sounds great. The Starfleet's in disarray, Federation's broken up, blah 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 blah. But I don't consider that a story. I consider that a situation.
Sorry, Clay, can I interrupt with this? My analogy that I've done is that what Discovery does for storytelling is say, Laura, I give you a pound of ham, a block of cheese, and a 100 slices of moldy bread, and I throw it at you, right? And it's all scattered all over the ground. I go, here's a sandwich. I didn't give you a sandwich, right? I gave you ingredients that make a sandwich. But the art of making a sandwich is not just to collect a whole bunch of information and then throw it at someone.
You have to go to Subway University.
That's right. You have to, yeah. And then I have to complain that you're not giving me enough cheese. And they say, we're only allowed to give you 2 slices of cheese. And I say, what is this? I thought this was America. And then I get dragged out. That's my analogy to Discovery. So information is not a story. Ingredients to something combined, or ingredients being in close proximity to you, is not a sandwich. There's something that defines the sandwich, and there's something that defines a story. Discovery is what Clay's saying. Situations where characters tell each other stuff is not effective storytelling. I need to see them do things. I need to see their actions, because you only know what the characters are made of when they do their actions, not what they say. Because if characters are just talking, you're like, are they lying? Do they actually believe this? What are they doing? The only way you know true characterization is when you see the characters do something. And that shows you if they're a liar. It shows you what their beliefs are. It shows you how they believe in things. It shows you what they're actually core made of. And this show is obsessed with just having characters talk to each other and have scenes where Detmer's like, no one says hi when I fly the plane, and you're supposed to think that that's a story that they've done. Detmer's story is not a story. Detmer's story in this is she gets diagnosed with a disease that goes on for a couple episodes. She gets to shoot the missiles, and then she's better. It's like there's no story arc to this. What is the point of telling me that story? That's my problem with it, and the problem with treating the scenes of characters saying things as if it means something. In my opinion, it's just information, and I'm not interested in information.
I think here's a good, and this is probably towards where we'll end on this as well. By the way, for those who are watching it now, Pensky File, it's penskyfile.com, right?
The Pensky File.
The Pensky File. Yeah. Of course it is. That's exactly where it goes. The Pensky File. One of the coolest logos I've ever seen, guys. Go check them out for sure. Okay. It's not just Trek, but all kinds of things.
I'd like to thank my Fiverr Korean animator who made that. I don't know their name, but they did a good job.
Fiverr's awesome. I love the hell out of Fiverr. When they go and see, we'll start it this way. The episode where they go to Earth, without getting too deep into it, because I want to give you my interpretation of it, because I think it's going to show the drastic difference between us, if I'm right. What'd you think about that episode?
Remind me what happens except
sure.
that they go to Earth.
So they arrive to Earth. Earth activates a shield. It says, get the heck out of here. We don't want anything to do with you. You're going to bring the pirates. Pirates come. And,
pirates wearing masks so that you can't recognize who they are.
Yeah, exactly. Which makes all kinds of sense, because that's, as you do.
Yep. That's Discovery storytelling shortcut right
okay,
there.
So
you add a bump in the road that does not add anything or make any goddamn sense, and then say that that's a story. But sorry, right. Laura, go ahead. Yeah.
So here's my interpretation, and this is where I think that we go where we vary. And let me ask you this, because I think this may be what's holding me back. I don't mean this in a bad way, because I think it's a detriment on my side. Have either of you been through film school or have a film degree at all? I don't mean in a bad way.
I do not. I've worked tangentially in the film world, right, but I've never gone through.
Here's storyboarding, and Clay works in comic industry, which is story.
And you don't even need the degree to be in film. People do it all the time. It's not necessary. But here's why I think it kind of holds me back, because I think that was a pretty great world building episode, and here's why. They show up to Earth expecting Starfleet to be there. Starfleet isn't there anymore. Starfleet left because Starfleet was afraid that the United Earth was going to become a huge target. That's another, for me, world building piece of Starfleet. Starfleet left to protect the Earth, something very Starfleet would do. The Earth became the United Earth again, and it became very isolationist. I don't think they're bigoted. We see them have aliens and stuff like that, but they only care about who's on the planet right now. Anyone who's not on the planet isn't their concern. Right?
They're like Israel. They're concerned with protecting themselves, but they're not exactly like actively hostile towards the outside world.
Yeah, they've forsaken all of their colonies and everything, and they're just really, really trigger happy, right? A colony, they're attacked by pirates. Not a huge fan of the mask, I agree. It's just a way to make it so that they can do the big reveal. They're attacked by pirates. They learn that it's one of their colonies that they let go. And this goes back to what Wes is saying. No, I'm sorry, Clay was saying that I'm making more than it should be. But a colony comes, they realize their faults, and I think that starts a change in the United Earth, which I hope, the United Earth is going to show up to help the Federation in the finale. I don't know that they will, but I think that'd be great for them to go from ice.
They always do.
It's definitely happening.
To go from the timing of it would make no sense. She wouldn't have enough time to pull them together, but I still think it would be.
It makes as much sense as the Kelpians showing up in jet fighters.
It'll be 4 for 4 of modern Star Trek seasons ending, and all your friends combine and shoot people.
But you see what I'm saying? When you look at all of these pieces on the floor, it really makes an interesting sandwich. But maybe again, that's just me pulling too much. Because again,
I don't want to eat it. I don't want to eat this dirty sandwich.
I don't know. I don't know. It has a ton of world building there. I don't know. I thought it was a good episode because of all the nuance in it. Go ahead.
Want to go, Wes?
Well, yeah, I think that is an accurate description, because I'm not interested in that kind of world building. To me, world building more organically grows out of an interesting story. What the problem with that story is that story logically makes no sense. Why did the colonists just not say, please don't shoot us, we're Earth people, we'd like to come back home? Instead, they have this drawn out, bizarre disguise thing where they're wearing helmets and you can't tell who they are. They haven't just contacted them, sent like a FM frequency radio signal out to the moon of Titan or whatever it is to say, hello, is anybody out there? It's a story that's built on this idea, but like all Discovery stories, the writers are not interested in looking at the scaffolding that's holding up this idea. They're just like, just do it, just get that out there and see what happens. But the stories in great shows live in the details down there. They make you feel things that, like, even if the resolution of a story is terrible, like that resolution is, the journey to get there was fun. Discovery's journey is not fun. That's the problem. And if when you get to the end and it's a bad resolution, you just go, that was a colossal waste of time getting there. What a strange decision to do that, even with the best intentions, even if they're trying to flesh out a world and this is what the Federation is supposed to be. The way they go about it is hugely flawed.
And also, I didn't find that episode landed from a point of what is the crew of Discovery really taking away from the story that they've just told. Because, you know, like all the best Deep Space Nine episodes and even the better ones of Enterprise have that moment at the end where someone kind of reflects either positively or negatively on what all of this has meant. And the end of that episode has the secondary crew going down to Earth, which is in pristine condition and seems to be fantastic. I mean, there doesn't seem to be anything wrong.
It has that tree that's existed for
that tree.
1,000 years. It's that was it 100? I thought it was like over 100
It's probably
years.
it's the biggest tree that I've
whatever it
ever
was.
seen.
Yeah,
Whatever it was.
it's a 1,000-year-old tree.
You go through telling this story about how isolationist Earth is
Suffering.
bad,
Suffering. Yeah.
the bad thing to do, and they're rejecting everybody. But then you go down to Earth, and it's great. Like, it looks like they made the right decision. And I don't, and the stuff that just happened doesn't really resonate with anybody on the cast or on the ship, because instead of that, they have this scene where everybody gets to be nostalgic for a tree.
It should give them insight into why they have to fix this current
Right.
state of the universe.
Right.
There should be like, this is what happened to Earth. This is what we can't allow to continue happening.
I'm not denying that you're right about the pieces that they give you, and I think that episode is largely probably the most thematically linked to the larger story that they want to tell about Starfleet and about putting the Federation back together and stuff like that. But even if that's the case, the takeaway is that everything's fine. There's no reason to rebuild the Federation because everything on Earth is fine. You know, I feel like they're not super honest.
I'd be fine with that storyline too. Just like, there is no reason to rebuild the Federation. They learned that it's like, what is the Federation in this universe? But
Sure.
Sorry, go ahead.
I mean, isn't that kind of like, obviously this is going to take us in a whole different direction, but isn't that kind of where it feels like this should be going to a certain extent? Because Michael is so determined to put the Federation back together without really giving us a reason as to why that needs to happen. And ultimately, shouldn't through a season of where they talk about she has a Messiah complex, talk about how everything has to be about her, talk about how she always has to inject herself into everything, and don't ever undercut that or subvert that or address it, it feels like ultimately the realization she should have is that the Federation as it was is not the answer and doesn't need to be the answer, because it's about what the next step is.
Yeah.
But I don't know. That's not the story they've been telling.
Let me ask this out of curiosity. I think it was more Earth was being like hoarders than anything else, and they were afraid of getting attacked. What if the story, instead of having the mask, it was they knew it was the colony, like Alpha Centauri or whatever, and they just said, "Oh, Alpha Centauri, they've become pirates ever since this occurred," and then everything else goes the same way. They find out it was a miscommunication, that Alpha Centauri, they're hurting, they don't want to be pirates, they're forced to be pirates. If they had started with that, do you think it would have been a better story, out of curiosity? Or do you think it still would have been pretty horrific?
No, because it's still undercut. So say that happens and they reveal that the only way for that outcome of that story to make sense is that Discovery is never allowed to come back home. Earth at this point is so paranoid and so scared that you are not allowed back on Earth. And so people go, we can't even go home in this future. Like, this is what has befallen us. But instead, it's just they solve the problem. And then they, as Clay says, they go to Earth and it's fine. Everything's fine on Earth. And that's a huge storytelling problem.
In that story you're describing, I think what happens is Discovery, because Earth is not helping them. Earth is being very isolationist, and they're not even really trying to engage with Discovery. Discovery figures out that these people are from Earth, and Discovery goes, "These people are from Earth," and Earth goes, "We don't care."
Yeah, don't care.
And so that tells Discovery what the state of the universe or the galaxy or Earth is from that point, and gives you something you can really sink your teeth into as far as a dramatic story. Then I think that through line right there does more for me in a world building sense than any sort of, here's a scene where someone from the government talks about what happened the last 100 years.
Yeah,
I
don't know.
If we want to go for world building, I think Blade Runner is fantastic at world building, and they don't talk about anything. They just do their world building through what they give you and through what you see and through how people act and stuff. And I don't think talking about the state of things necessarily equates to good world building. But I guess
it takes away from the story. It would be it's a wasted time where you could actually have story and problems and conflicts is instead wasted on things that have to be told to you instead of shown to you, or have characters act the actions of.
I wonder if Trek, the way people remember it, and I've said this before, I wonder if Trek truly can exist anymore with how tastes in storytelling has evolved. Because I'm not necessarily disagreeing with you guys. I just, when I look at this, especially with the ending the way it is, there are so many episodes in all of the series that I think would end in a similar way, which wouldn't make a lot of sense, where it's happier than it should be. Because I don't disagree. I think that would be interesting for the United Earth to be, like you said, to be isolationist, and for them at a personal level realize, like that one, whoever it was, General, whatever her name is, or whoever she was, to realize there may be something wrong, but it still leaves with the United Earth saying, get the hell out of our space. And then you can lead towards the United Earth actually showing up to save the Federation. That could be an interesting, which I think, but I would think most TNG and other episodes would end the way it ended here. I don't know if Trek can be that way anymore.
Sorry to interrupt, but there's a fundamental difference in the storytelling, which is that in an episodic storytelling, that downbeat is the end of the first or second act.
Yeah.
So that you have the negative outcome, but in a serialized story, the end of one episode can be the downbeat that you then build off of. And however, the downbeat in this episode only makes sense as a downbeat, where you can end this story positively. I can see a Discovery third season ending positively, but you have to suffer you have to have trials and tribulations to get to that point to pay it off at the end, which is what a TNG or DS9 episode would do in the first 10 minutes and then build to a happy end.
Right. And I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I find it interesting that we've spent the entire time talking about Starfleet and haven't even broached 2 episodes of sending Georgiou back.
I do have to run pretty quick, Laura, but can you defend Georgiou's 2-parter episode?
I don't. I mean, when you say defend, what do you mean?
What purpose did that story serve except to get rid of a character, and it took 2 hours of a 12-hour story to do?
What narrative story does that add to it? That's an interesting thing, to the overall arc. First off, you have, I don't think every episode has to move towards the overall arc. Filler episodes exist for a reason. We saw them in the DS9 Dominion War. We saw Power Rangers is well known for it.
I would argue this is a different storytelling mechanism.
The gold standard of storytelling.
Power Rangers. Dominion War, I mean, DS9 did it too. And I think it in a similar way. I don't know that it moves anything forward. I don't know. I don't know that it does.
Is Georgiou a good character? Just curious what you think. You like Georgiou?
I've never liked Georgiou. I think she was a rotten character from season, what is it, 1 or 2? Season 2?
Season 1.
Season 1. I think that she never made any sense. Her hero worship of Michael never made any sense. I think she was better in season 3, but I've never really liked her. It's from a rotten tree. There's not a lot you can do with that.
Can we just go out with my summation of Georgiou and how it represents what Discovery is? Georgiou was a character that clung around for no particular reason, other than it seems that they like the actress and they wanted to have this character. There's no real reason that she even jumped into the future with Discovery, because we already knew at that point she has a Section 31 show that she needs to be alone for, and she can't have everybody else with. So
Right.
outside of that, Georgiou spent this entire season being an insult comic who was walking around roasting people and threatening to kill them, right? She says goodbye, and Saru and Tilly have a scene where they're like, it's been great to know you. You're like, what a fantastic person you are. And she says, Saru, if we were alone, I would cut your head off and eat your fear tendrils. And he says, oh, that Georgiou, what a cad.
What a
she is.
scamp.
And so she goes off and goes back to the mirror universe, realizes after killing a bunch of people in the mirror universe that there's a better way,
and torturing
her daughter,
into
that she has something to
subservience.
feel about. Then just kind of leaves the show through a sort of half-baked idea plot. That to me is Discovery's storytelling in a nutshell. It's a whole bunch of weird decisions that you have a character who's doing nothing that then climaxes in one episode, and they flip the character. And they say, this character's learned something. And you go, this character was just roasting people. That's all she did in her scenes this entire season. She hasn't learned anything. She did not have a single story where Georgiou and Tilly or Saru go off and do something, and Georgiou learns that there's a better way to exist in this universe. Never happened. Georgiou never learned anything in this universe. And then they have two-parter to say goodbye, where she cries and says, can Michael come with me? And you go, what is this show talking about? Where is
Did she say, can Michael come with me?
She does, yeah. And the guy says, no, she can't. She's got to stay here.
Really? I missed that part. Oh, man.
And then it ends with,
you'll be a great captain or something.
Yeah, your gratuitous, glad-handed speech to somebody else who doesn't need it.
Yeah,
which happens every single episode, and it's just tiring.
I think her saying goodbye, especially to Tilly, I think there was I felt some emotion in that. I'm not a huge fan of Georgiou. I did like how she finally told Tilly, I think your crew will outlast you or something. It's like the most backhanded compliment you'll ever receive.
You'll soon be demoted after your incompetence.
No, not that. I think she was inferring she'll be killed, that she will take care of her crew so well that she's going to get killed or something like that her crew will survive her. I don't know. I can't really defend Georgiou all that much. The can she come with me is stupid. I've always hated the superhero worship. But that'll be a good point to end on it. You win. Again, guys, I apologize so much. I hope you come back when we don't have this many issues. Check them out, The Pensky File. What's the next one coming out? What's the next thing people should be looking for?
Well, we're going to close out Discovery, obviously. Clay has Rotten Horror Picture Show, which is a horror podcast. He's going through the top 200 horror films on Rotten Tomatoes with Amanda. He has Badass, which is a Batman the Animated Series show, where all these are going through like the episodes of each one. And then we're currently covering, once Discovery ends, we're going to resume Star Trek Enterprise. We're at the end of season 2 for Enterprise. We're going into the third Xindi arc.
Season of my life.
Longest season of our lives.
Yeah, I've been watching that.
You can, just for the Enterprise thing, Enterprise, fairly boring show. Discovery, exciting show. Enterprise does better storytelling. That's the difference between the two of them. But it's just not exciting storytelling.
Xindi arc, man. I don't know. First season was pretty rough for me. But, I mean, that could be a conversation for another time.
We find the second season to be much worse.
Yeah. By the way, guys, I see a lot of you have been agreeing with them more than me. If you want to support people, go check out this Patreon right here. That's the only way that we all can keep doing this is by the lovely support of you. So check them out at penskyfile.com as well as their Patreon. Send them some love, guys. Thanks so much for coming. This will be going unlisted, and then I'll cobble all three together, and then will somehow talk them into coming back on when we never have these issues. Though I don't think they'll ever talk to me again. It's been so rough. Thanks so much for coming, and definitely check these guys out.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
All right, and we are